But that's why you got to have it because so many illegals
No,
are
you don't,
here.
because you just proved my point. If people are out here getting these IDs without any stipulation, then when they show up to the polls, what is going to be the difference if they're already going to the polls voting illegally? If you
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. And if you are new here, you picked the perfect video to start with. So what we have here is a conversation between Jesse Lee Peterson and Ernest Owens, a journalist, author, and someone who is not afraid to push back on anything. The topic starts with voter ID laws and access to the polls, and what sounds like a simple policy debate turns into something way more layered than either of them expected. Ernest comes in with a specific argument, Jesse keeps pressing him, and at one point Jesse says something that completely flips the entire conversation on its head, in a way I genuinely did not see coming. Stay all the way through this one because the moment that changes everything does not come early. And if you leave before it hits, you're going to miss the most important part of this whole exchange. Also, drop in the comments where you are watching from right now. We have people tuning in from all over, and I genuinely love seeing where this community is coming from. Say your city, your country, whatever you are comfortable with, just let us know you are here. All right, let's get into it.
What's stopping American citizens from getting up, going to the poll, and voting? Who stopped them from doing that? Or what
I think
stopped
there's
them?
certain barriers, right? So, for example, when you're making a mandate that they have to be a U.S. citizen or show their ID, to show a certain type of ID and credentials, we know that there are certain senior citizens who don't have access to their original photo IDs, and we know that when you're putting it in certain areas, like in the Deep South, where we know that there's a lot of Black and brown voters who are living out there, when you're cherry picking certain areas where those voting protections is happening, I think that's a problem. Like you're saying, people need to, everyone does not have a photo ID or have their birth certificate in
Well,
order
what's
to
wrong
verify
with
their
them
photo ID.
nowadays? They can't go and get a vote, go and get a piece of ID. It's so easy to get a piece of ID nowadays without even going to the DMV. What's wrong with the people that they have lost their common sense that they can't get up and get a piece of ID?
Well, if you actually know how difficult it is for folks that are much older, see, listen, I'll be 35 in October. I'm fine. I have my IDs. But I'm thinking about when you look at the voting population of certain areas, right? We know that a lot of older voters are showing up to the polls more than people younger than me.
You
And
said
yet
they are not or they are?
they are. They are. They vote more
Right.
often. I mean, if you look at certain cities, like even in Philadelphia, there are older voters that are showing up to the polls in more competitive numbers than millennials.
I know,
And
but
so
what's
when we,
wrong with them? They don't have sense enough to get an ID. Somebody got
well,
to tell them, oh, you need to get an ID. Or what's wrong with anyone in America that they cannot go and get an ID nowadays?
well, I'm saying that the service. I mean, look at what's happening with TSA. I think first of all, going to, like these ID voter register, these ID assessment places, these DMVs as they call them, right? They're not as frequent or as available. There are people that have to drive hours out or go to different locations to get these things. These are barriers of entry. And I'm talking about people who are not working regular jobs, right? People are retired, people on disability, social security, people that live in nursing homes. Like the idea of just saying, oh, just simply get up and get ID, it's easier said than done. And we know this, like they know this. Like we know that that if you create this policy, where these individuals are clearly citizens. These people are clearly been voting.
This is the part that blows my mind every single time this conversation comes up, because the question being asked here sounds simple on the surface. Why can't people just go get an ID? But the moment Ernest starts answering, you realize how surface level that question actually is. And here's what people don't realize. When you frame the voter ID argument as just go get one, you are already assuming that every single American lives the same life, has the same schedule, has the same physical ability, and has the same access to the same resources. That assumption is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and most people never stop to question it. Ernest laid it out clearly. He said he is talking about people who are not working regular jobs. People are retired, people on disability, social security, people that live in nursing homes. Now think about that for a second. A person who is 80 years old living in a nursing home, who has voted in every single election for the last 50 years, you are now telling that person their participation depends on whether they can physically get to a DMV that might be hours away from where they live. That is not a small ask. And this is where Jesse's response genuinely caught me off guard, because instead of engaging with that reality, Jesse said, and I want you to really hear this, "What's wrong with them? They don't have sense enough to get an ID. Somebody got to tell them, oh, you need to get an ID." You have to understand what is actually being said there. These are elderly Americans. These are veterans. These are people who built this country. And the response to their access challenges is what is wrong with them. When that framing tells you so much about how certain people view civic participation as a privilege that you earn by jumping through hoops, not a right that should be protected regardless of your circumstances. Here is the historical context that matters. The literacy test era is one of the most documented examples in American history of how access barriers were deliberately used to suppress specific voting populations. You didn't need to say you cannot vote. You just made the process complicated enough that certain people couldn't complete it. The method changes, the effect doesn't.
You know, it's interesting to me because it's only when these conversations are had when people feel like they're going to lose. When the right think they're going to lose, then they call out voter fraud, right? So when Trump won, recently, there was no complaints about voter fraud or concerns. Now he's worried about the midterms. The Republicans are not popular right now.
But
now we're hearing the conversation about voter ID being brought up again because he is afraid. So it's funny how when he doesn't win or when his party doesn't win, they're ready to call out elections and call things out.
But what I'm
when their
trying to
party is doing
understand,
well, they don't call it out.
Ernest, what I'm trying to understand is what's wrong, and there were concern about elections during this last time too with Donald Trump, but what's wrong with adult people that they cannot go with the computer age being that it is now? It's so easy to get false IDs and all kinds of stuff. What's wrong with young or older people? And then I want to ask you about healthcare. What's wrong with them that they cannot get an ID? They need somebody to let them vote without an ID because they don't have sense enough to get an ID. What's wrong? What happened to them that they can't take care of themselves by getting a simple ID? I want to know
like
that.
I said before, it's the same. Listen, this is the same thing with other social services. We know that you could say unemployment, right? Veterans, right? Why can't veterans just
I know,
get
but
up
I
off their
want to
feet
understand
and get a
about
job?
the ID thing. What's
I'm
wrong
telling you
with
this.
them?
There is a barrier to access. I just said that. There's a barrier to access. It is not as accessible for everyone.
This is where Ernest said what needed to be said, and I think a lot of people scrolled past how sharp this observation actually was. He pointed out something that once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Voter fraud only becomes a national conversation at very specific moments, not after every election, not consistently, only when a particular side feels like they are about to lose. When that party is winning, everything is fine. No concerns, no investigations, no emergency press conferences about election security. But the moment the polls start shifting, suddenly the entire system is compromised and we need new ID requirements immediately. Ernest said it directly. When the right think they're going to lose, then they call out voter fraud. And he backed it up with a specific example. When the party won recently, there was total silence on fraud. Now, heading into a competitive election cycle where they are not polling well, the voter ID conversation is back at full volume. You have to understand how significant that pattern is, because if the concern was genuinely about election integrity, it would be consistent. It would not turn on and off depending on how comfortable a party feels about their chances. The selectivity is the tell. And then Jesse's response to all of this was to circle back and ask again, what's wrong with them that they cannot get an ID? They need somebody to let them vote without an ID because they don't have access enough to get an ID. That is not an argument, that is avoidance. Ernest just explained a clear and documented pattern of selective outrage, and the response was to repeat the original talking point louder. When someone cannot engage with the actual point being made and just loops back to where they started, that tells you everything about how strong their position actually is.
But IDs, even illegal aliens get IDs.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
That they do not get a government U.S. I mean, they can get a visa, but if you're saying undocumented, first of all, if you're going to call them illegal, right? If you're going to say they're undocumented, I don't think they can get a government issued ID.
Yes,
if they're
they can.
undocumented.
As a matter of fact, they can go
You're
to
calling them
the
illegal. No, let's be very clear. Are we saying, because I want to be very clear, if you're calling them illegal, I think you're referencing that these are individuals who don't have a visa, a work permit, or any of those things. If they don't have a social security number, if they don't have a birth certificate, if they don't have any of those means of documentation, there will be no way for them to get an ID.
Not true. You can go right down to the corner nowadays and get them. You can go to the park and they're selling those things like 90 going north. And then you go down to the DMV and you show them your fake ID.
Okay,
they'll give you a driver's license or another ID. And you can register to vote right at the DMV.
So I don't believe that, but I will say this.
Why don't you believe that?
Because it's unfounded. Like, I just think this whole idea of massive illegal. So here's the point. Okay, let's agree to disagree on that. But here's the point. If that is true, if that's what you believe, then it will make it no point to even mandate the ID policy at the polls. Because if you're saying it's so easy for people to fake it and get it anyway, then why would it even matter to have the ID policy to begin with?
But that's why you got to have it, because so many illegals
No,
are
you
here.
don't, because you just proved my point. If people are out here getting these IDs without any stipulation, then when they show up to the polls, what is going to be the difference if they're already going to the polls voting illegally? If you believe that, you don't really believe that, but if you do,
no, not only do I believe it, I know it.
There's no sense. There will be no sense to actually mandate the ID policy then. Because all that's going to be is a waste of taxpayers' dollars, money, and resources that we could be using for better infrastructure. I mean, I just think it's a waste of resources and time if you think it's already happening. If you don't think it's already happening, you're going to create a barrier for voters. Listen,
you don't know the illegal alien get false IDs?
I'm saying that if you believe that they're getting these false IDs,
I know that
and they're going to the polls and voting and registering the vote, and there's no safety precautions already in place already, then it's moot to even demand to have an ID policy.
Oh, this is where it gets interesting, because Jesse made a move here that I genuinely did not expect, and it completely changed the direction of this whole exchange. Jesse claimed that undocumented individuals can simply walk to a corner, get a fake ID, take it to the DMV, and use it to register to vote. That was his argument, said it with full confidence, and I want you to sit with that for a moment because of what Ernest did next. Ernest did not get emotional. He did not argue about whether fake IDs exist. He took Jesse's claim and followed it to its logical conclusion. He said, if that is true, if that's what you believe, then it will make it no point to even mandate the ID policy at the polls. This is the part that is so clean it almost feels unfair. Because think about what Jesse actually argued. He said the system is already being beaten. Fake IDs are everywhere. People are walking right through the supposed safeguards without any problem. If all of that is true, and Jesse said it like it was obvious, then what exactly does adding a voter ID mandate at the polls actually solve? You would just be creating an expensive, bureaucratic barrier that stops legitimate voters while the people you claim to be worried about are already around it. Jesse Peterson essentially dismantled his own argument from the inside. He came in trying to make the case for stricter voter ID laws and ended up describing a scenario where those laws would be completely useless. This is actually a well-known logical pattern called assuming the conclusion. You build your argument on a premise that, if true, makes your solution irrelevant. And the reason it is so hard to recover from in a live debate is because you cannot take back the premise without admitting you overstated it in the first place. Ernest did not need to attack Jesse. Jesse handed him the win by trying to go too far. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.